An inner court disciple. Just like that, Xianxia was an inner court disciple of the ancient sword sect. The treatment received by inner court disciples was much better than outer court disciples. They didn't just receive classes from Lord Realm experts every month. They were given 100 eternal immortal crystals. Besides that, there were many other benefits. However, they had many missions too. There weren't many inner court disciples, less than 50 in fact. As for elite disciples, there were even fewer. Perhaps there were only around 10 of them. Elite disciples were the true core of the ancient sword sect because they were the central pillars of the sect. Thus, the sect gave these elite disciples abundant resources. Simply speaking, elite disciples could enter the ancient sword cave, and it was there that Sword Scroll's main body's fragments resided. Now, it was clearly impossible for him to directly seek to become an elite disciple. It would be too insane, and it would draw the attention of the sect's higher-ups. He had to keep a low profile. He had to take it slow. In his room, Xianxia sat cross-legged and Sword Scroll spoke abruptly. "You can take a look at the Sword Cliff." "The Sword Cliff?" Xianxia asked. "What's that?" Sword Scroll replied. "It's where the founder of the ancient sword sect perished. He was a figure of the ancient times, someone from the same generation as Wu and I and the others." Xianxia asked, "What's over there?" She fell silent for a short while and replied, "I'm not sure, but you can try your luck there." Moreover, his sword intent and will in the sword Tao still remain there, and they may be of help to you. Xianxia thought for a moment and nodded. If it was someone from the same generation as Wu and I, he would definitely not be ordinary. Moreover, he was a sword cultivator, so there was definitely something to learn from him. Xianxia thought for a moment, and then he left for the sword cliff. Because of how unique the sword cliff was, the ancient sword sect didn't prohibit any disciples from going there. All the disciples could observe and comprehend the will in the sword Tao and sword intent their founding ancestor had left behind. Of course, it was only open to inner court disciples and elite disciples. It was one of the benefits they received. Once he arrived at the sword cliff, Xianxia saw some people there. Some were in deep thought before the cliff. Some were seated cross-legged as if they were in comprehension, and some had started to practice with their swords. It was quite bustling. Sword Scroll suddenly said, "Go over. A strand of the founding ancestor's sword intent is there." Xianxia nodded and walked over. There was a man and a woman already there. Both of them were very young and around his age. The man wore a violet robe with a sword chest on his back. He was seated cross-legged there with his eyes closed, seeming to be in deep thought. The woman, on the other hand, wore an ink-green dress with landscape embroidered on it. She was pretty, not gorgeous, but had quite an elegant aura. As if she'd sensed his arrival, the woman suddenly glanced at Xianxia. Xianxia nodded slightly as a form of greeting, but she immediately moved her gaze away. Xianxia didn't mind because the people of this world weren't very friendly at most times. In any case, it didn't bother him. Xianxia's gaze descended onto the cliff wall, and it was smooth as a mirror. Xianxia didn't notice anything on it, so he pondered deeply for a moment and closed his eyes. It didn't take long for Xianxia to sense a strand of sword intent. Sword intent. It wasn't strong. After all, even the strongest sword intent would be corroded by time. Xianxia was visibly moved because of something that it contained instead. Will. Xianxia sensed the will of the ancient sword sect's founding ancestor through his sword intent. Unyielding. An unyielding will. He'd seen something like it in the past, but they were completely different. The unyielding will in this sword intent was toward the world, the heavens, all things, and destiny itself. A very, very long time ago, when humans had just appeared on the earth, humans were innately weaker when compared to other races like the demon race. The humans were enslaved during that time. The human race's current status had been obtained with the sacrifice of countless. Just like the human race's method of cultivation. If the ancestors of the past hadn't invented them, the human race would have probably vanished from history by now. As for those who had been able to survive those times, they were absolutely not ordinary. Unyielding. The people of that era had an unyielding spirit. Actually, if he thought about it, Wu and I, martial ancestor, and Chen Xuanan had the same will. Unyielding, no matter what. It was a form of belief in the sword Tao. Actually, the ancient sword sect's founding ancestor had a rather similar sword Tao with Yang Yi. They were generally alike, but there were some differences. Belief in the sword Tao. Yang Yi suddenly thought of something. Since a Nanjing could merge her beliefs in the martial Tao into her spear, why couldn't he do the same with the sword? Belief. At most times, belief was extremely important, and it may become a person's source of strength, like belief energy. The founding ancestor of the ancient sword sect didn't possess an unyielding sword intent. It was that he'd added his own beliefs into his sword intent. That was Yang Ye's understanding of it all, and his analysis received Sword Scroll's acknowledgement. Suddenly, a voice interrupted Yang Ye's thought. "You're Yi Yang." Yang Yi turned around and noticed that it was the woman who'd spoken those words. Yang Yi nodded. She spoke indifferently. "I heard you just joined the outer court, and then you quickly became an inner court disciple." Yang Yi smiled. "That isn't illegal, right?" She glanced at him. "You're very arrogant." Yang Yi shook his head. "You're wrong. I just don't conform to the expectations of many and some rules. So, you think I'm arrogant?" She gazed at him for a long time and said, "There's this mission, want to do it together?" "A mission?" Yang Yi shook his head. "I'm not interested," she replied. "Don't you want to become an elite disciple?" Yang Yi smiled. "Don't lie to me. I have to be at the four-world realm at least to become an elite disciple, and I need to be capable of fighting 5-world realm experts. There's a strict requirement toward age 2. She shook her head. "That's in the past. Now we have an opportunity." Yang Yi replied. "Huh." She spoke indifferently. "Have you heard of the war dimension?" "The war dimension." Yang Yi nodded. "I know a little," she said. "The desolate race will go to war with Eternal Kingdom sooner or later. At that time we'll be summoned to fight. Now, the war dimension seems to need more people and it's open to the outside now. Want to give it a try?" Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, "The requirements to enter the war dimension aren't any lower than the requirements to become an elite disciple, right?" She shook her head. "Its requirements are quite low now. Or, to be more precise, they are looking to recruit a secondary team, or you can call us the replacement team. So long as we get into the war dimension, the sect may allow us to become elite disciples in advance. Because the various powers have an agreement that states all elite disciples are protected. In other words, old geezers cannot act against the core disciples of the various powers. If we enter the war dimension, it's very likely that the sect makes us elite disciples. Because those who survive the war dimension are much stronger than the elite disciples of the various powers. The war dimension. Yang Yi naturally knew about it. It was where the Eternal Kingdom specially fostered experts to fight the desolate race. And Yang Yi really wanted to go have a look. Yang Yi gazed at her. "Why are you asking me to join you?" She replied indifferently. "You're not the only one. Many other inner court disciples will be giving it a try. Or I should say that anyone with some strength will be trying. If we're able to get in, at least we can take care of each other. There's always conflict where there are people. And it's 100 times crueler than the world outside." Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied, "Are you sure we can become elite disciples by joining the war dimension?" She shook her head. "I dare not say for sure." Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied, "All right, let's give it a try. 1 month." She continued, "We'll teleport over in a month from now. Prepare well during this month." "Right, I'm Moya." "Moya." Yang Yi nodded. "See you in a month." Yang Yi turned around and left. He wanted to head back and give belief a lot of thought. Once Yang Yi left, the man suddenly opened his eyes. "Demonis Mo, why have you taken a liking to him?" She replied indifferently. "Can't I?" He replied. "Let me give you a warning. He's not ordinary, so it's best if you don't target him. Otherwise, you'll die before you know it." "Oh." She was suddenly quite interested. "Shuiren, why don't you tell me why he isn't ordinary?" The man, Shuiren, stood up slowly. "That's all I have to say. It's your problem whether you believe it or not." He turned around and left. Moya grinned. I wouldn't ask him if he was ordinary. A powerful body refiner. I haven't seen one in a very, very long time. Xianxia returned to his room, sat down cross-legged, and entered the primordial pagoda. Sword Scroll went over to him and said, She seems to possess the inner charm physique. It's similar to Zhixian's physique. Xianxia was slightly stunned, and then he smiled. What does that have to do with me? Sword Scroll replied indifferently. Body refiners and those with special physiques are her favorite, because they are full of vitality and carry special effects. If I'm not wrong, she is targeting you. Of course, it may be because she wants to absorb everything you have. The inner charm physique. Xianxia seemed to have thought of something. It's just like Zhixian's physique? Sword Scroll nodded. Oh! At this moment, Xianxia thought of something. A completely smooth body. Xianxia suddenly became agitated when he thought of that. But it didn't take long for him to suppress it. He had important things to attend to, and he could only do those things. Once he was done with the important stuff, Xianxia went to the cultivation room, sat down cross-legged, and closed his eyes slowly. Belief. And Nanjing's invincible spear attack carried her beliefs in the martial Tao, and it could be explained as an imposing aura. An imposing aura that advanced courageously to kill any enemy with one strike. Could also be described as confidence, powerful confidence, the confidence of being invincible. An attack that would definitely kill. And Nanjing's imposing aura was something that few could resist. What were his own beliefs and convictions? Xianxia was quite lost when he thought of this, because he'd never considered this. A long time passed. Xianxia asked himself that question, and he realized that he aimed to protect, and it could also be considered as his responsibility. There were major responsibilities and minor ones. The responsibilities of ordinary people in the mortal world is to protect their spouse, children, and parents. Why did they work hard every day? Actually, it was to protect their spouse, children, and parents. A person would constantly force themselves to do better for their family. As for Xianxia, what he protected was actually no different than them. He wanted to protect the people by his side. In the cultivation room, Xianxia just sat there silently all day and night. On the second day, he suddenly stood up, and then the sword domain covered the entire room. After that, the blood vessels beneath Xianxia's skin started trembling. A short while later, strands of powerful bloodline energy converged throughout him. At the same time, his madness intent surged out, but it didn't take long for him to suppress it. Pure bloodline energy. Xianxia looked forward with his sword in hand, and then he suddenly stabbed forward. It wasn't an attack for eternal life or the grand Tao, it was to protect. Belief. Just like sword intent, it was an ethereal thing, but it did exist. Over and over again. Actually, if someone was watching Xianxia, that person would think that Xianxia's attacks weren't changing at all. However, Sword Scroll was able to sense that changes were occurring. They were internal changes. Xianxia's strongest trump cards were the sword domain, flying swords, and his bloodline. Of course, this belief energy could be added to them now. It was Xianxia's determination to attack. Xianxia's attacks had always been decisive, ruthless, and without hesitation. But now that he'd added belief energy to it, they were faster and even more decisive, ruthless, and lacking in hesitation. It was like how a person would stop hesitating once he or she was sure that it was the right thing to do. Belief energy allowed Xianxia's sword to become faster and more ruthless. That was the benefit of it. The sword domain, flying swords, bloodline energy, and belief energy. Could be said that defeating a 5-world realm expert wasn't difficult for Xianxia at all now. Not to mention that he was still suppressing his cultivation. According to his estimations, if his body was strong enough, he could instantly attain the 4-world realm. It was absolutely heaven-defying speed to most people, but it was just all right to him. After all, he possessed a pile of divine treasures and natural treasures. It was like comparing a rich man's son to an ordinary person. How difficult was it for an ordinary person to become a wealthy person without any help? However, if a rich man's son were to start a business, then not to mention just becoming wealthy, that person could become filthy rich. After all, the resources available to them were completely different. Throughout the month, Yang Yi cultivated madly in the sword domain, flying sword, and his bloodline. Yang Yi wanted to bring everything he had to his own limits. A month was like a year in the cultivation world. Actually, Yang Yi had inspected the space within the primordial pagoda. It was different when compared to the space in the outside world. He couldn't see through such a heaven-defying thing, but he knew that the space here and the outside world were somehow linked, but they were different at the same time. Yang Yi wasn't able to fully comprehend the difference, but it was all right because the space here belonged to him. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Yang Yi left the primordial pagoda. As soon as he left his room, he met Emoya. Obviously, she'd been waiting for him. She sized up Yang Yi and said, "Let me be frank. You may die. Even if you die, the sect won't do anything for you. So, think about it before you agree." Yang Yi nodded. "Let's go." He wanted to have a look at the war dimension, the place Eternal Kingdom had made specially just to fight against the desolate race. Emoya smiled. "All right, let's go to the teleportation platform then." She suddenly asked as they traveled, "Are you from the South Region's Yi clan?" Yang Yi shook his head. "No." She glanced at him and didn't say anything. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the teleportation platform. At this moment, there were around 10 people gathered here. All of them were Limit Breaker realm experts. The strongest was at the Three-World realm, a robust man with a huge iron sword on his back. Emoya led Yang Yi over to them, and she gazed at the robust man. "Allow me to introduce you. This is our inner court's head disciple, Tai Yuan." The robust man sized up Yang Yi and shook his head. "You just attained the Limit Breaker realm, so it'll be too dangerous for you. You should head back and cultivate a few more years." Yang Yi smiled. "It's fine. I'm not afraid of death." Tai Yuan glanced at Yang Yi. "All right, it's your choice. Then let's go." Suddenly, an old man appeared here. It was the inner court elder, Elder Su. Elder Su could be described as the top elder here in the inner court. They bowed slightly to Elder Su, and the latter nodded. "You'll be representing my ancient sword sect in the war dimension. So remember not to engage in internal strife and allow others to laugh at us." He glanced at Yang Yi and another white-robed man when he spoke. Emoya spoke to Yang Yi via voice transmission. "That's Lu Yunxian. He gained quite a bit of fame after becoming an inner court disciple, and I heard both of you. Anyway, be careful." Yang Yi glanced at the white-robed man and moved his gaze away. All he'd done was taken the man's seat. Yang Yi felt that it shouldn't be something which made the man treat him as an enemy. Meanwhile, Elder Su added, "This is an opportunity for all of you. As for the sect will benefit from your arrival in the war dimension too. The higher-ups have promised to reward you generously if you're able to enter the war dimension." Yang Yi suddenly asked, "What's the reward?" Everyone gazed at Yang Yi. Elder Su glanced at Yang Yi too. "Why ask about all of that? You'll find out once you get in." Yang Yi felt quite helpless because the old man clearly didn't like him much. Elder Su continued, "Our ancient sword sect won't be the only ones entering this time. The South Region's Yi clan, East Region's Lang clan, and East Region's Yu clan will be sending their forces too. Don't bring shame to our sect once you get there. Understand?" They nodded. Elder Su nodded. "Go on." Just like that, they entered the teleportation formation while Elder Su watched. Once they left, the outer court elder appeared beside Elder Su. Elder Su asked, "Have you found out what I asked?" Kong Ming shook his head. "As soon as I started inquiring about the Yi clan, someone from their clan came to see me. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, I didn't continue my investigation. So, I cannot say for sure if he is an illegitimate child of a branch family in the Yi clan. Perhaps only Elder Li knows his true identity. But Elder Li is dead. So, I think his identity is quite suspicious." "Suspicious?" Elder Su's eyes narrowed slightly. "It is quite suspicious." Kong Ming spoke solemnly. "His strength isn't sufficient to kill Elder Li. I'm afraid he's backed by another power, and they are targeting our sect." Elder Su fell silent for a long time and said, He's concealing everything very well. I'm afraid his objective isn't merely the ancient sword scroll and heavenly sword scripture. Kong Ming asked, should we take action? Elder Su shook his head. Let's wait and see. If he really has backing, we'll be alarming them by acting now. If there's no one backing him, then we've misunderstood, and it will cost us a genius. Geniuses are the most important in this world right now. Not to mention that he is concealing his strength very well. According to my estimations, he may have combat strength equivalent to the 3-world realm or even 4-world realm. Kong Ming's pupils constricted abruptly. That's impossible, right? Elder Su replied indifferently. He wasn't afraid of you at all. There's only one explanation for that. He's confident in his ability to defeat you. Besides that, I've asked the primal lion wolf and it told me that he's very dangerous, extremely even. He isn't ordinary. Anyway, let's leave him be and watch for now. If his presence will bring harm to our sect, then let me see how he will act against us. But if he won't bring any harm to our ancient sword sect, we naturally should foster him with everything we have so that he'll become a central pillar of our sect. Kong Ming nodded because that was all they could do for now. 2 hours later, Yang Yi and the others left the teleportation passageway, and they appeared on the peak of a mountain. Yang Yi asked, "This is the war dimension?" Emoya shook her head. "This is its entrance. We must wait here until people come to get us from the war dimension. After that, we'll find out what is required to get inside." Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, "What do you know about the desolate race?" Emoya replied, "I know a little. I heard they were extremely formidable once. However, they are just losers who we've conquered before. I heard they are trying to make a comeback this time. Haha, they are just courting death." Yang Yi was stunned for quite a while before he asked, "The desolate race isn't terrifying to you?" Emoya replied with a question. "Do you think the desolate race is very terrifying? Of course, I can't deny they definitely have some strength. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared to attack my eternal kingdom all those years ago. However, you should be aware of the outcome. The outcome was that they lost, right?" Yang Yi thought for a long time and said, "Sure enough. History is written by the victor." Obviously, Eternal Kingdom had made the desolate race seem weaker when they were educating the future generations. Besides a few people, the entire Eternal Kingdom probably felt that the desolate race wasn't terrifying at all. Was it good or bad? As far as Yang Yi was concerned, it was definitely bad for Eternal Kingdom. They were unaware of the desolate race's true strength. While it made them very confident, they would have an absolute nightmare when they really faced the desolate race. As for Yang Yi himself, it was a good thing. He didn't have a good impression of Eternal Kingdom at all. After all, it was ceaselessly targeting him and Snowy. So, he would definitely choose the desolate race when faced with a choice between the desolate race and Eternal Kingdom. Meanwhile, Emoya sized up Yang Yi and asked, "Do you think the desolate race is very terrifying?" Yang Yi shook his head and smiled. "Forget that. I was just asking. You don't mind, right?" Emoya didn't say anything. Meanwhile, a ray of light appeared in the sky. It didn't take long for it to descend before them, and then it dispersed to reveal a young man in a black robe. The young man glanced at them and asked, "The ancient sword sect?" Tai Yuan stepped forward and cupped his fist. "We are inner court disciples of the ancient sword sect." The young man frowned slightly. "Why are you so weak?" The expressions of the disciples from the ancient sword sect became quite unsightly. It was quite a slap to their faces. The young man ignored the change in their expressions and added, "I thought the sword cultivators of the ancient sword sect would be pretty good, but I didn't expect the strongest to be merely at the 3-world realm, and there's even one who just attained the limit breaker realm. Do you think you're here to tour around and have fun?" Tai Yuan spoke solemnly. "While we aren't extraordinarily monstrous geniuses, we're naturally not much weaker." "Is that so?" The young man laughed coldly. "Allow me to be honest. All of you are terrible." The faces of the others turned gloomy when they heard this. It was a direct slap to the face. Tai Yuan looked up at the young man and spoke coldly. "I may not be very strong, but I'd like to seek guidance from you. If they could endure this, then the ancient sword sect would become the laughingstock of the entire Eternal Kingdom. Guidance from me? The young man laughed coldly. To be honest, I don't really want to play with all of you. However, since you want to play, then let's play. It'll at least give you a chance to realize how much you're lacking. Tai Yuan drew the huge iron sword on his back, grabbed it with both hands, and stared at the young man. A moment later, his sword left his grasp and shot up into the air. It was a direct and aggressive attack. That was the impression it gave everyone. But it didn't take long for their expressions to change, because the young man had grabbed the tip of the huge iron sword with just one hand. The sword was still trembling, yet it couldn't move an inch, even when held by a single hand. Viciousness flashed through Tai Yuan's eyes, and then he leaped over to the sword. At the same time, countless strands of sword energy shot down at the young man like a storm. At this moment, the entire sky was covered in sword energy. It was flashy, but it wasn't strong. Yang Yi shook his head. They may seem like a huge storm, but they were very, very weak. They just made for a nice show. Sure enough, the young man slammed a punch forward, and a wave of powerful energy rippled out and obliterated the sword energy, while Tai Yuan was blasted away. Once he landed on the ground, Tai Yuan was pushed another 300 m back before he finally stopped himself, and there was blood on the corner of his mouth. The young man held the huge sword in his grasp and laughed coldly. A sword cultivator? I have to admit that there are many powerful sword cultivators in this world. But to be honest, all of you are very weak. You're not suited for the war dimension. He flicked his finger once he finished speaking. The iron sword shook violently and transformed into a ray of light that shot explosively at Tai Yuan. Everywhere it passed, it left a long mark in space, clearly displaying how powerful it was. Tai Yuan's pupils constricted, and he seemed like he was facing a formidable enemy. The young man was too strong, and if he couldn't stop the sword, then he would be severely injured even if he could avoid death. Tai Yuan was about to act when a man appeared in front of him. After that, the man stopped the iron sword with one hand. It was Yang Yi. The iron sword was motionless in Yang Ye's grasp. Everyone gazed at Yang Yi. Mo Ye's gaze flickered as she gazed at Yang Yi, and no one knew what she was thinking. Yang Yi glanced at the sword, and then passed it to Tai Yuan. The latter glanced at him and said, "Thank you." Yang Yi smiled. "It's nothing." Tai Yuan may not be very strong, but he dared to step forward just now. So he was no coward, and Yang Yi was willing to help people like this. The young man sized up Yang Yi and said, "A body cultivator." Yang Yi gazed at the young man and nodded. "Sort of." The young man asked, "Shall we spar?" Yang Yi shook his head. "I just want to say a few words. I think it's quite prejudiced to think that all of us have no right to enter the war dimension. How about you let us give it a try? If we're really too weak, we will naturally give up. No one will try to do something beyond their ability, right?" The young man shook his head slightly. "To be honest, your strength really isn't sufficient. Ask the elite disciples of your sect to come give it a try instead. Besides that, even though we are only recruiting a reserve force, there is still a minimum requirement. Unfortunately, all of you aren't there yet." Yang Yi thought for a moment and asked, "What's the minimum requirement?" The young man pointed at himself. "I'm one of the weakest. Defeat me or fight me equally, and you can enter." The others had quite unsightly expressions on their faces when they heard this. The young man was at least at the four-world realm, and he was clearly one who had relied on himself to attain such strength. But the strongest among them, Tai Yuan, had lost. He'd lost without the slightest chance at victory. Defeating the young man was the requirement. Yang Yi fell silent for a few moments and gazed at the others. "Does anyone want to try?" The young man had spoken very arrogantly, but it didn't represent that he was wrong. Since such a requirement had been set, achieving the requirement was their own problem. All of them remained silent for a long time. In the end, a man stepped forward. It was Lu Yunxian. Everyone gazed at him, and he looked up at the young man. "Let me try." As soon as he finished speaking, a sword appeared in his grasp, and then a ray of sword energy shot up into the air. It was extremely fast and powerful. It was a very pure ray of sword energy. It was stronger than Tai Yuan's sword energy. Much stronger. Yang Yi nodded slightly. Needless to say, Lu Yunxian's strength wasn't bad at all. His sword energy was very sharp and pure, and it was much better than Tai Yuan. The young man spoke indifferently. This is a little better. As soon as he finished speaking, he tapped his finger forward like he was putting down a go piece. The space there shook, and then ripples undulated through space toward the sword energy. It was extremely powerful. The sword energy was forced to a stop in midair. Moreover, every single wave that slammed against the sword energy made it dim down slightly, and the fifth wave obliterated the sword energy. Meanwhile, a sword suddenly appeared before the young man and shot straight for his forehead. It was swift like a bolt of lightning and at an extremely tricky angle. He'd chosen close-quartered combat. A cold smile curled up on the corners of the young man's mouth. Close-quartered combat. I've never feared anyone in the same realm of cultivation. He slammed his fist forward once he finished speaking, and a wave of powerful fist intent rippled out like a torrent, causing space to shake violently. Suddenly, Lu Yunxian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he shook his right hand. A resounding sword howl surged through the area, and then fine hair, thin threads of sword energy shot out from the tip of his sword. These threads of sword energy pierced through the young man's attack and enveloped him. A moment of silence ensued. Boom! The sky shook violently as a wave of powerful energy rippled through the sky. The energy pushed Lu Yunxian around 300 m back. But it didn't take long for a ray of powerful sword energy to flash through the sky and push the young man around 100 m back. A short while later, the sky gradually calmed down. The young man had a slight advantage in the battle. The young man didn't attack again. He glanced at Lu Yunxian and said, "Very pure sword energy with pretty good strength. You barely pass." Lu Yunxian cupped his fist at the young man, glanced at Yang Yi and moved aside. The young man glanced at the others on the ground below and said, "The war dimension is more brutal than you've ever imagined. This isn't a place of ease and comfort. It's the most dangerous place in Eternal Kingdom. Don't treat this place as a platform to improve your strength. While it is one, it's only limited to those who are strong and unafraid of death. Alright, I won't say more. Does anyone else wish to stay? If there is, then step forward." He seemed to have thought of something at this point and gazed at Yang Yi. "I think you're quite strong, so come try me." Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied, "Allow me to correct you. I'm not pretty strong. I'm very strong." Everyone here was stunned, speechless. Very strong. Everyone gazed at him. Isn't that a little too arrogant? The young man was stunned for a moment and chuckled. "Good, very good. Let me see how strong you are." Yang Yi didn't waste his breath and just flashed over to the young man before swinging a punch. The young man's eyes narrowed slightly, and he too swung a punch at Yang Yi. He had really never feared anyone in the same realm of cultivation when it was a melee battle. However, his expression changed drastically when his fist came into contact with Yang Yi's fist. Bang! The young man was blasted over 300 m away. But Yang Yi didn't stop. He appeared before the young man again, and then he stomped his foot down at the young man. The young man didn't dare to act carelessly. He took a step back, and then his figure soared into the air before he slammed his fist at Yang Yi. Boom! A wave of powerful energy rippled out from his fist, causing space to shudder. Moreover, a wave of powerful fist energy appeared on his fist. But Yang Yi wasn't pushed back at all. Bang! An explosion resounded in the sky, and space shook violently as if an earthquake was running through it. A few dozen breaths of time passed before space gradually calmed down. They didn't attack each other again. The young man glanced at his trembling hand and gazed at Yang Yi. "You pass. Pass." Yang Yi glanced at his own hand, and it was trembling slightly too. Needless to say, the experts in the war dimension were of an extremely high standard. So, it would probably be very difficult for him to defeat the young man if he relied on his physical strength alone. But it was normal because they would be fighting against the desolate race in the future, so how could they possibly be weak? The young man glanced at the others down below. "Who else?" Emoya suddenly stepped forward and smiled. "Let me try." She tapped her foot against the ground and instantly transformed into a ray of sword energy that surged up into the air. The young man was about to attack when she suddenly vanished on the spot, and this made the young man's expression changed drastically. He immediately pushed his palms out toward both sides. Bang! A wave of powerful energy rippled out with him at its center. At this moment, the space around the area turned ethereal. No one could see the battlefield clearly. A few breaths of time later, the space there returned to normal. At this moment, Xianxia had returned to where she was. The young man took a deep and long glance at her. "I made a mistake." She nodded slightly and didn't say anything. The others here were stunned, and they wondered how she just passed like that. Xianxia glanced at Xianxia. Others may not have been able to see it clearly, but he did. Xianxia had defeated the young man with a single attack. A very strange attack. It was quite extraordinary. "Let me try too." Meanwhile, another man stepped forward. It was Shui-Iran. Shui-Iran cupped his fist at the young man, and then a sword suddenly shot out from the sheath by his waist. The sword was like a bolt of lightning that shot at the young man. A flying sword. At the instant the flying sword shot forward, the young man tapped a finger forward, causing space to ripple. Bang! The powerful energy contained within the flying sword pushed the young man backward, but the flying sword itself suddenly appeared behind the young man instead. However, the young man's reaction was extremely swift, and he immediately turned around and swung a punch. A wave of powerful fist energy rippled forth from his fist, but it wasn't able to repulse the flying sword. Conversely, the young man was pushed backward repeatedly. This time, the flying sword didn't follow up with another attack, and it just turned around and returned to Shui-Iran's sheath. Shui-Iran cupped his fist. It was a good battle. The young man glanced at Shui-Iran, and then he gazed at the others. Anyone else? None of the others stepped forward. The young man spoke indifferently. Since no one else is stepping forward, all of you can return. Otherwise, you'll just be giving your lives away. The other disciples of the ancient sword sect had quite a bit of dejection on their faces. They had come here full of hope, yet now, they were heading back without even entering the war dimension. It was a terrible feeling no matter who experienced it. Xianxia and the others didn't say anything. Just as the young man had said, it was best to head home if their strength was insufficient. Otherwise, they would probably just be courting death. Meanwhile, Tai Yuan stepped forward and glanced at Xianxia and the others. "Congratulations. Be careful in there." Xianxia nodded. "Take care." Tai Yuan grinned. "We'll meet again in the sect." He led the others away on their swords. The young man said, "The four of you can come with me." As he spoke, he formed a strange seal with both hands, and then a teleportation formation appeared nearby. A short while later, all five of them entered it. The war dimension. In the teleportation passageway, the young man said, "You've joined the war dimension. Of course, you're still disciples of the ancient sword sect, but once you receive orders from the war dimension during the war with the desolate race, you must come to the war dimension immediately and receive your orders." Xianxia suddenly asked, "Will there be any conflicts between the war dimension and our sect?" The young man replied indifferently, "The war dimension is a place jointly created by the Eternal Lord and the entire Eternal Kingdom. It transcends all others. Under normal circumstances, there won't be any conflict because your target is the desolate race." "The desolate race?" Xianxia frowned slightly. "It's just the desolate race. Do we have to treat them so seriously?" The young man glanced at her. "Put thoughts like that away. Otherwise, you'll die before you even know it." Xianxia frowned, but she didn't say anything. Obviously, she'd realized some things. If the desolate race really was that weak, then why would Eternal Kingdom spend countless resources on this mysterious war dimension? Obviously, they wouldn't. Meanwhile, the young man added, "I heard the number 1 genius of your ancient sword sect, Wuxia, is at the 5-world realm?" Shui-Iran replied, "War Dimension has heard of senior brother Gu too?" The young man nodded. "We know every genius of the Eternal Kingdom well. We extended an olive branch to Gu Yuxian, but he didn't come." Shui-Iran asked, "Why?" The young man replied indifferently. At that time, his reason was that he was on the verge of advancement. But now, he has no reason not to come. Xianxia asked, "Do you summon people by force?" The young man glanced at him. Eternal Kingdom doesn't belong to a single person. It belongs to everyone. Wuxia has a responsibility to protect Eternal Kingdom. He isn't the only one. All of us have the same responsibility. We would have nothing without Eternal Kingdom. If the desolate race defeats Eternal Kingdom, your ancient sword sect or whatever clan you represent will cease to exist, won't they? He looked up into the distance and continued. All those years ago, the master of your ancient sword sect led a few dozen powerful sword cultivators in battle to stop the desolate race. During that battle, your sect lost a few dozen sword cultivators, your super divine treasure was destroyed, and even your sect master himself lost his body. That is why the ancient sword sect is allowed to send people here today, and it's also why your sect is respected by the world. Isn't it? Needless to say, the young man was right. The ancient sword sect had suffered tremendous losses during the battle and had almost been annihilated. However, no power had targeted the ancient sword sect after the war, and its status had grown even greater in Eternal Kingdom. There was a war tablet in the central region of Eternal Kingdom, and it was around 300 m tall. On it were the names of all the experts who'd lost their lives during the war. The ancient sword sect had almost 100 names on it, so it was a very huge and striking amount. Meanwhile, the young man suddenly said, "Speaking of sword cultivators makes me think of someone. A man called Xianxia." Xianxia was slightly stunned and gazed at the young man. "He knows about me?" Xianxia. Emoya asked. "Who's that?" The young man replied, "A sword cultivator who killed a 5-world realm expert while at the True Void Realm. A 5-world realm expert at the True Void Realm." Emoya was astounded. "That's impossible." The young man nodded. "I think it's impossible too. However, that's the news we received." Xianxia suddenly asked, "Why haven't we heard of such a genius?" The young man replied, "Because he's from Eternal Border, or as we call them, he's one of the people on the outside." Emoya frowned slightly. "An outsider? Impossible. The spirit energy there is scarce, and there's no eternal energy. How could such a genius exist? Is it just an exaggerated rumor?" The young man replied, "Perhaps. However, he isn't ordinary. He has a sprite progenitor with him. I really don't understand why a sprite progenitor would stay with him." A sprite progenitor. All of them were truly shocked when they heard this. A sprite progenitor. They may not know about the desolate race or Xianxia, but they knew about the sprite progenitor. The sprite progenitor had once been the symbol of the Eternal Kingdom, the progenitor of all sprites. The young man continued, "Let's forget the sprite progenitor and focus on Xianxia himself. If the rumors are true, then it's quite terrifying that he's able to kill a 5-world realm expert while at the True Void Realm. Such a person can't be allowed to live when he is hostile toward our Eternal Kingdom. Of course, he won't be allowed to live. Some people in the war dimension have already requested to be sent to kill him." Xianxia just followed the group in silence. Emoya suddenly asked, "Xianxia's a sword cultivator too?" The young man nodded. "He is." Emoya grinned slightly. "That's quite interesting. I didn't expect such a genius to exist in a world like that. I only wonder if he'll still be a genius if compared with our ancient sword sect's geniuses." Suddenly, someone said, "He's definitely a piece of trash." Everyone looked over to Xianxia because he'd spoken those words. Xianxia said, "Just think about it. Is it even possible to kill someone at the 5-world realm while at the True Void Realm? It's absolutely impossible. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely an exaggeration." He clenched his fists at this point. "If I encounter him, I'll crush him with just 2 punches." The young man glanced at Xianxia. "It's good to be confident." Xianxia smiled. "Anyway, may I know your name?" The young man replied indifferently, "Li Mu. Remember that some others will be joining the war dimension too. Fighting isn't prohibited in the war dimension. However, you cannot kill or cripple anyone. Otherwise, the consequences are very serious." Xianxia hurriedly asked, "How serious?" The The others couldn't help but glance at him. This fellow has violent inclinations. Li Mu said, "You'll either be exiled from the war dimension or sent to a place. Trust me, you won't want to be there. It's countless times more terrifying than death." Xianxia wanted to ask more questions, but they had emerged from the teleportation formation. They appeared in a gray and hazy world. The entire world was gloomy, and the smell of decaying corpses and blood filled the surroundings. Besides that, they could see severed limbs from time to time, and they belonged to both humans and demons. A battlefield. Meanwhile, Li Mu spoke abruptly. "You're at the war dimension now, and this is a battlefield, and it's your final test. Pass through this battlefield and travel 500,000 kilometers to get to War City. You can only walk all the way. Of course, you can't fly on your swords. Remember that you have no way back now, and the only way out is death. But if you die here, your sect won't avenge you. You would have died for nothing. If you give up now, you will bring shame to both your sect and clans. Of course, we don't allow anyone to give up. So, good luck." Li Mu withdrew a golden talisman and crushed it, and then he vanished on the spot. Only Xianxia and the others remained here. "Walk all the way." After staying silent for a short while, Xianxia spoke abruptly. "I think we should join forces. What do all of you think?" Xianxia nodded. He had no objections because he didn't really want to use the sword. He wanted to keep a low profile as long as possible. But if he didn't use his sword, then it would probably be extremely difficult to get to War City, because he saw a corpse to the right. It belonged to a demon beast, and it was at the five-world realm. Emoya and Lu Yunxian nodded to display their agreement. It wasn't the time to fight on their own. Xianxia nodded. "Come on. Good luck to us." They walked off into the distance. They had extremely vigilant expressions on their faces. Xianxia was extremely vigilant toward the surroundings as well because he kept having the feeling that many eyes were locked on them. Around 15 minutes later, the ground before them quaked, and they readied themselves to enter battle. However, their expressions changed when they saw the scene ahead. It didn't take long for them to simultaneously run the other way. Bam! 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 A group of demons were coming from behind them. They looked like lions, yet were colossi that were many times larger than an ordinary lion. Moreover, there were over a dozen of them, and all of them were at the four-world realm. That was a lethal issue. All four of them were fleeing madly. Xianxia naturally had to flee as well. If he used his sword, he could annihilate them with ease. However, it would be too shocking. His identity couldn't withstand being investigated carefully. They fled extremely swiftly, but the demon beasts were even faster. A short while later, Xianxia suddenly said, "We can't continue like this. There are definitely more of them here. If we just flee, we'll be finished if we run into their lair." Emoya suddenly asked, "So you want to fight them?" Xianxia nodded. "What else can we do?" Emoya fell silent. Meanwhile, Xianxia said, "I've counted, and there are a total of 12 demon beasts behind us. So we'll each take 3. Any objections?" Emoya and the others fell silent for a few breaths of time, and then Xianxia broke the silence. "All right." Meanwhile, Lu Yunxian said, "All right." Emoya took a deep breath. "Then let's fight." As soon as she said that, they stopped and turned around to gaze at those demon beasts. All of them had extremely solemn expressions on their faces. Those demon beasts were like a horde as they charged over, and the imposing aura they emanated was simply one which could crush the world. Xianxia shook his head as he gazed at them. Arya could fight a few dozens of them on her own, and if Snowy and Arya were both here, the demon beasts would either be beaten down or take the initiative to surrender instead. Xianxia suddenly missed them when he thought of them. He wondered if they missed him too, and in Nanjing too. Xianxia shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He just charged at the demon beasts. Once they saw Xianxia charge first, Xianxia and the others didn't hesitate to charge at the demon beasts as well. Xianxia's gaze descended onto the demon which was leading the charge. At this moment, it was looking at him too, and there was undisguised ferocity in its eyes. It didn't take long for them to get closer and closer to each other. Suddenly, Yang Yi leaped up and arrived above the demon, and there was a tombstone in his grasp. It was the tombstone that Arya had obtained that day, and she'd forgotten to take it with her. So it was his to use now. Yang Yi swung the tombstone down with both hands. Meanwhile, the demon beast didn't dodge and slammed itself against the tombstone. Bang! An explosion resounded like a thunderclap, and then the demon howled in agony and crashed down to the ground. Meanwhile, Yang Yi was blasted into the air as well. However, he slammed the tombstone down in midair because another demon beast had charged at him. Bang! The demon beast was slammed down to the ground. Bloodline energy. While Yang Yi wasn't using his sword, he was using his bloodline. With the strength from his bloodline energy, he wasn't any weaker to a 4-world realm demon beast. However, right after he slammed away the second demon beast, a third slammed against him. Boom! Yang Yi was blasted away. His head droned as if there were countless bees buzzing through it. Suddenly, the demon appeared before Yang Yi again and slapped its claw at his head. In the primordial pagoda, Oxy was about to charge out with the primordial acts of creation upon witnessing this. But Sword Scroll stopped him. Oxy was clearly quite anxious, and so were the others. Even if they ignored reasons that were linked to Arya and Snowy, while they weren't very close to Yang Yi, they had been with him for a long time. So they treated him as one of their own. Or it should be said that they'd subconsciously acknowledged him as one of their own. If Oxy was in danger, the others would definitely not stand by idly. While they weren't the same species of demon beast, they were a part of this family in the primordial pagoda. Sword Scroll spoke softly. "It's fine. He'll be all right." Outside the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi shook his head when he sensed the powerful approaching force, and then he slammed a punch at the demon beast. Bang! Yang Yi was blasted away again. As for the demon beast, it was slammed to the ground. However, this little bit of impact was well within the limits of its endurance. It didn't take long for all 3 demon beasts to stand up on their feet and gaze at Yang Yi. This time, their eyes were filled with the desire to kill. Obviously, Yang Yi had utterly infuriated them. Yang Yi spat out the blood in his mouth. Only now did he realize that he was a fucking sword cultivator, and he was actually so weak when without his sword. Meanwhile, the 3 demon beasts charged at Yang Yi. This time, faint red light arose around them. In an instant, their figures grew larger, and the auras they emanated were much stronger too. Their target was Yang Yi. Yang Yi's eyelids twitched because he knew that they were serious now. Yang Yi took a deep breath and waved his right hand. The tombstone flew toward him, and he embraced it in both arms before charging at them. The demons were stunned by the sight of this. Is that fellow that fierce? They naturally wouldn't shrink back from this and charged forward. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll's voice resounded in Yang Yi's mind. "What are you trying to do?" What was he trying to do? Yang Yi had a ferocious smile on his lips. "My body is extremely powerful too. I'm going to kill these fellows with my physical strength." Sword Scroll shook her head. "You're asking for a beating." Yang Yi's body was extremely good when compared to others in his realm of cultivation, but they were 4-world realm demon beasts. They were many realms of cultivation higher than him. Wasn't he asking for a beating when he was going against bodies at the 4-world realm while his was only at the 1-world realm, and they were even demon beasts too? However, it didn't take Sword Scroll long to think of something, and she immediately came to an understanding. "I see." Yang Yi planned to use intense battle to improve his body. Outside the primordial pagoda. Boom! An explosion resounded and Yang Yi was blasted away. He spat out multiple mouthfuls of blood in midair, and it was like an absolutely gorgeous fountain of blood. As for one of the demon beasts, Yang Yi's tombstone had cracked its head open, but that injury didn't really affect it, so the 3 demon beasts charged at Yang Yi once more. Meanwhile, Yang Yi crawled up from the ground and charged at them. At the same time, 3 figures, 2 male and 1 female, were watching the battle from the shadows. The man who led the group spoke abruptly. "That fellow is quite interesting. He's a sword cultivator, but he's using brute strength. What's his name?" The other man replied, "Yi Yang." Yi Yang. The woman frowned. Yi Yang. Yang Yi. Yang Yi? The others were stunned when they heard her. But it didn't take long for the leader of their group, the man with a saber by his waist, to shake his head. Lianin, do you think he's Yang Yi? The woman called Lian and replied indifferently. I was just saying that randomly. However, it's not impossible. Everything is possible, right? The man in the lead smiled. Yang Yi is a sword cultivator, but according to the information I received, he's only in the true void realm. Moreover, he has the number 1 sword in our universe, Executor. But this guy is at the Limit Breaker realm. While I haven't seen his sword, but I don't think he is Yang Yi. Moreover, no matter how arrogant and confident Yang Yi is, it's very unlikely that he would just enter our eternal kingdom and what dimension, right? Lian glanced at Yang Ye's group. Boring. She turned around and left. The man who led the group shook his head and smiled. Meanwhile, the other man spoke abruptly. MOU. Did the higher-ups reduce the requirements for recruitment because the war is finally coming? MOU shook his head and smiled. Who knows? Come on, let's go take a look at the so-called geniuses from those clans. Let's see how strong they really are. They turned around and left. Yang Yi and the others were still in battle. But in actuality, they were being beaten up. It wasn't just Moya and the others. Even Yang Yi was being completely crushed by those Peak 4 World Realm demon beasts. They had no chance to win. The worst was Yang Yi because he was going head-on against them with just his body. If he didn't have the primordial pagoda to ceaselessly repair his body, he would have died a long time ago. Now, his body was like a piece of metal that was being struck and tempered incessantly before being repaired. Under such circumstances, Yang Ye's body had started to undergo some sort of change. However, it was a change that came at the cost of risking his life. Suddenly, Sword Scroll's voice resounded in Yang Ye's mind. You can't delay any longer. They can't hold on. Yang Yi glanced at Moya and the others. At this moment, they were covered in injuries and were being completely suppressed. They were top experts in the inner court of the ancient sword sect, but their attacks weren't able to cause any material harm to these demon beasts. After all, these demon beasts far surpassed them in cultivation. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment, and then he looked up at the demon beasts and roared. A strand of faint dragon pressure rippled out from him. Dragon pressure. Yang Yi had consumed a dragon ball in the past, so he naturally had some dragon pressure. But the demons were stunned for a moment when they sensed the pressure. But it didn't take long for them to charge at Yang Yi again. The dragon pressure was too weak. Yang Yi was quite embarrassed by this. A moment later, he said, Dragon, come out here for a moment. Make yourself smaller, around area size. A moment later, the dragon appeared before him. It was around area size. It looked up at those demons and roars. A strand of dragon pressure rippled out. This dragon pressure was true dragon pressure, and it wasn't weak like Yang Ye's. The powerful dragon pressure, the primal true dragon, emanated forced all 3 demon beasts to a stop in front of Yang Yi. The dragon gazed coldly at them. Throughout its entire lifetime, it had only been beaten up by Area. Or it should be said that it feared no one except Area. Of course, that was only limited to demon beasts, and these demon beasts before it were absolutely beneath it. The demon beasts glanced at the primal true dragon with a solemn expression in their eyes. But it didn't take long for them to charge at the dragon. Yang Yi was quite amused by this. Dragon? You don't seem strong enough, huh? The dragon instantly had a ferocious expression on its face. And then it charged at them. Bang! One of the demon beasts was slammed away, and its body actually cracked open in midair. Meanwhile, the other 2 slammed against the dragon, but they were blasted away instead. While they were all 4 World Realm demon beasts, the dragon's combat strength was even enough to go against 5 World Realm experts. Moreover, it had been tempered by the Dark Void Divine Lightning, so its body was only inferior to an existence like Area. It could be said that its body wasn't something any ordinary demon could resist. The dragon didn't stop. It charged at the 3 demon beasts, causing their expressions to change drastically. At this moment, their minds had finally cleared up, and so they immediately turned around and fled. The dragon wanted to give chase, but Xianxia stopped it. The primal true dragon nodded, and then gazed at the other demon beasts. They sensed its gaze and looked toward it. At the same time, the dragon roared. Bang! A wave of powerful dragon pressure rippled out. The demons retreated and were extremely afraid when they sensed the dragon pressure. The dragon was about to charge at them when all of them took a deep and long glance at the primal true dragon, and then they turned around and left. Dragon pressure. One of the living beings that were at the top of the pyramid among demon beasts. They couldn't afford to offend the dragon. Obviously, they had guessed its identity, and so they'd retreated. The primal true dragons had such a right. Not all demon beasts dared to eat dragons like Arya. The dragon had succeeded at driving them away. Meanwhile, Emoya and the others gazed at the dragon. But the dragon ignored them and just returned to the primordial pagoda. They gazed at Xianxia, and Xianxia said, "Recuperate first." They nodded and didn't ask. They were all adults, so they would naturally not ask if Xianxia didn't say anything. Xianxia recuperated very quickly. It only took him a while to heal. Besides that, something worth mentioning was that he sensed that his body was at the border of breakthrough. It was about to advance further. It just needed a little more. Xianxia shook his head and sighed. If he'd been able to continue fighting for a while longer, he would have succeeded at attaining the two-world realm in the body. However, if he did that, the others would probably have died here. A short while later, Xianxia looked into the distance. "Allow me to be honest. This place is quite dangerous indeed." Shui shook his head. "Of course it is. But we have no way out now, right?" Xianxia nodded. "True. Anyway, just be careful." The others nodded. An hour later, they set off again. While they couldn't fly all the way, it would only take 2 to 3 days at their speed of walking. Of course, the precondition was that no demons stopped them on the way. Emoya suddenly walked over to Xianxia and asked, "Brother Yi, was that a dragon?" Xianxia glanced at her, and she smiled brilliantly. "I've seen a dragon, and it felt like a dragon to me." A dragon. Actually, practically all of them had never seen a primal true dragon. Not to mention them, even the seniors of the ancient sword sect had probably never seen a real primal true dragon. Xianxia said, "I think you should focus on how to survive. That's most important, isn't it?" Emoya smiled and didn't pursue an answer. However, Xianxia seemed quite mysterious to them now. Xianxia looked up into the distance as he thought to himself. War City should be the central area of the war dimension, right? I should be able to witness their overall strength there, right? After all, up until this point, War Dimension did seem quite extraordinary. What about the Desolate Race? While he hadn't really witnessed the Desolate Race's full strength, he knew they weren't ordinary either. So, a war between them would definitely be extremely terrifying. A short while later, Xianxia shook his head and smiled. He felt that he should worry more about himself instead. As for the Desolate Race and Eternal Kingdom, they could do as they please. Around 2 hours later, the sound of battle came from afar. Xianxia and the others exchanged glances. In the end, Shui said, "Shall have a look?" Xianxia nodded. "All right." They sped up, and it didn't take long for them to see a group of 3 men fighting a group of demon beasts on a plain. The demon beasts were the same demon beasts that had attacked Xianxia's group. They exchanged glances because it was such a coincidence. Emoya suddenly asked, "Should we help?" Shui gazed at Xianxia. "Brother Yi, what do you think?" Xianxia thought for a moment and said, "Let's help. They should be from somewhere else too and are here with the same objective as us." Shui nodded, and then they charged at the demon beasts. The demon beasts had clearly noticed Xianxia's group, and when they saw Xianxia, they were instantly stunned. While they didn't see the dragon, they didn't attack for the sake of remaining vigilant against the dragon. They just moved aside and vigilantly gathered together. However, they didn't leave. Obviously, they didn't want to give up. But they didn't dare to attack either. Obviously, they were afraid of the primal true dragon. After all, it was a primal true dragon. Xianxia and the others didn't attack when they saw the demon beasts stop attacking. After all, they'd just been beaten up by these demon beasts. Meanwhile, the three men walked over to Xianxia's group. Shui was about to speak when the man who led the group, a man in black robes, spoke abruptly. "Who are you?" His tone was cold and a little aggressive. Yang Yi frowned. Shui-Iren's face was quite unsightly as well. He was about to speak when the black-robed man suddenly walked over to Shui-Iren and asked, "Did we ask you to help?" Shui-Iren was speechless. The black-robed man glanced coldly at them. "What a bunch of busybodies!" Yang Yi and the others were stunned by this. "What the heck? We were nice enough to help, but this is how they are treating us?" Shui-Iren was about to speak when Yang Yi suddenly walked away. He gazed at the demon beasts and pointed at the three black-robed men. "Attack them! If you don't kill them, I'll kill you." At this moment, Yang Ye's temper had flared. The demon beasts glanced at Yang Yi, and then the demon beast in the lead of their group suddenly asked, "You won't interfere?" They were very afraid of the primal true dragon. Yang Yi replied, "I absolutely won't. Who do you think you are?" Suddenly, the black-robed man spoke. "You?" Yang Yi suddenly vanished on the spot. Bang! The black-robed man was blasted over 1 kilometer away. The others were stunned by this. Yang Yi patted his palms together. "No matter why you acted in that way, we came to help. Perhaps it spoiled your own plans, but as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't have acted in that way. Forget it. I don't want to waste my breath on you. Now, I can't stand the sight of you, so don't come looking for trouble. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you." As he spoke, he gazed at Moya and the others. "Let's go." Yang Yi turned around and walked away. Moya and the others hesitated for a moment before following Yang Yi. Only the two men remained on the spot with quite unsightly expressions on their faces. Attack? They naturally didn't dare to do that. Yang Ye's attack had struck fear in them. Moreover, there was a large group of demon beasts nearby. Once they were sure that Yang Ye's group had left, the demon beasts gazed at the two men. They were about to attack when a ray of white light flashed over from afar. It was extremely fast and instantly arrived before the demon beasts. A moment later, a huge mirror appeared above them. Rumble! Countless beams of light rained down like a storm. In an instant, the demons were blasted backward repeatedly. But that wasn't the end of it. A white shadow suddenly charged into the group of demon beasts. Bang! A white whip flashed through the demon beasts, and then one of them cracked open at the center. Meanwhile, the remaining demon beasts were pushed backward repeatedly. However, a few more demon beasts were struck by the whip before they could even stop themselves. Hiss! 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 In an instant, a few of them exploded apart. The leader of the demon beasts immediately led the others away and fled. Once the demon beasts left, the white light dispersed to reveal a woman in a black and white robe. She glanced at the corpses in the surroundings, and then waved her right hand and put them away. Meanwhile, a man went over to welcome her. "Yixian, you're here." The woman called Yixian nodded slightly. She gazed at the black-robed man who was lying on the ground and frowned. "What happened?" The man replied, "You asked us to keep those demon beasts busy, so we did just that. However, four people suddenly arrived here. They wanted to take advantage of the situation and attack us. So we..." A short while later, she looked up into the distance, but she couldn't see anyone. Yixian's face gradually turned cold. "Chase after them." Once she gave the order, her group went off in chase of Yang Ye's group. Yang Ye's group was walking swiftly behind a mountain range. Shui-Iren suddenly said, "I'm afraid trouble will be coming for us soon." Moya nodded. "They aren't ordinary. Sai, we should just watch when we encounter something similar in the future. We were trying to be nice, but we met people like them." Lu Yunxian suddenly said, "They should be from one of the clans." Shui-Iren suddenly asked, "Why do you say so?" Lu Yunxian replied indifferently, "They are arrogant and conceited. They don't seem like disciples from any sects or independent cultivators. Normally, even people from normal clans wouldn't lack intelligence to that extent. So, there's only one explanation. They are from a large clan, and they innately feel a sense of superiority." Moya suddenly smiled. "Brother Lu, if I'm not wrong, You're from a clan too, right? Lu Yunxian nodded. A small clan. Moya smiled and didn't ask more questions. Meanwhile, Lu Yunxian suddenly gazed at Yang Yi. Brother Yi, are you from the South Region's Yi clan? Yang Yi was quite surprised. He hadn't expected Lu Yunxian to suddenly ask about that. As far as he was concerned, shouldn't Lu Yunxian be trying to look for trouble with him? But it didn't take long for Yang Yi to shake his head and smile, because he was clearly underestimating Lu Yunxian. Yang Yi was a person who would be nice if someone else was nice to him too. He smiled and replied, sort of. However, I'm just an illegitimate child of a branch family. So, to be precise, I can't be considered to be a member of the Yi clan. An illegitimate child. Moya and the others were quite surprised. They hadn't expected Yang Yi to be an illegitimate child. It wasn't something to be proud of. Meanwhile, Shuiran suddenly smiled. Brother Yi, you possess such strength and natural talent, and coupled with the fact that you've entered the war dimension now, I think the Yi clan will definitely open its doors to you and allow you to join the main family. Yang Yi smiled. That doesn't make a difference. My own strength is what's important. Shuiran smiled. True, they sped up. They didn't encounter any demon beasts on the way, but they didn't dare to let down their guard. Especially Yang Yi, he kept having the feeling like they were being watched. He wanted to use the sword domain to investigate, but he discarded that idea after giving it a little more thought. Once he used the sword domain and it was noticed, he would have some trouble to deal with. Needless to say, he had quite a few shackles on himself when he came to Eternal Kingdom. However, it couldn't be helped. Once his identity was exposed, he would definitely die no matter what. The important matter at hand was to get Sword Scroll's main body as soon as possible. Suddenly, Yang Ye's expression changed. He swiftly turned around, and a shadow had appeared behind him. A moment later, a ray of cold light swept toward his throat. Yang Ye's reaction was very quick. He dodged to the side by around 300 m. However, the shadow followed closely behind him. Yang Yi slammed a punch at it. Bang! A wave of powerful force rippled out of Yang Ye's fist, and the shadow was blasted away. Yang Yi was about to follow up with another attack, but the shadow vanished as if it had never been there. Yang Yi turned around, and he noticed that the others had encountered the same thing. All of them had unsightly expressions on their faces, because they had suffered varying degrees of injuries, especially Lu Yunxian, who'd lost an arm. If he'd been just a little slower, he wouldn't have just lost an arm, he would have lost his head. Yang Yi asked, "What were those?" "I think they were phantasmas." Moya spoke solemnly. "I didn't expect them to exist here." Phantasmas? Yang Yi frowned slightly. It was the first time he was hearing about them. Moya nodded. They are a type of spirit. Once some people lose their bodies, they choose to cultivate their souls. They focus on cultivating the soul, and they are very mysterious. I've only heard of them before this. I never expected to see one for real. Mysterious. Yang Yi nodded. They were quite mysterious indeed. If he hadn't reacted quickly and possessed keen combat instincts, he would have suffered an injury too. Lu Yunxian suddenly asked, "Was that a test?" Shuiran nodded. "It should be. They won't let us get through this battlefield that easily. So be careful." Yang Yi gazed in the direction of the city, and he was losing his patience as he felt that he was wasting time here. It was too slow. As if he'd noticed what Yang Yi was thinking, Shuiran suddenly smiled. "Brother Yi, if you're confident, you can go on ahead. We can get there ourselves." As far as they were concerned, Yang Yi was quite mysterious, or it should be said that he'd concealed his true strength. After all, Yang Yi still hadn't used a sword. Yang Yi glanced at them, thought for a moment, and then shook his head and smiled. "Let's go together." If he were to be frank, they would probably barely make it to the city without him. It wasn't that he was looking down on them, but this place really wasn't a place that just anyone could survive in. Those phantasma from before were absolutely elusive, and at the four-world realm. Earlier, the other phantasma had only retreated because he'd repulsed the phantasma which attacked him. According to his inference, that phantasma may have sensed his strength. At their level of cultivation, They could sense when someone or something was dangerous. Shui and the others didn't say a word when they heard Yang Yi. It was perfect for them if Yang Yi stayed because they felt safer with him around. They continued forward. But they didn't travel for long before the sound of space being torn open resounded from behind them. They stopped and looked back, and they saw four figures charging at them. The group was led by a woman in a black and white dress. It was Yi Xian. Yang Yi frowned when he saw them because they felt hostile to him. It didn't take long for them to arrive before Yang Ye's group, and then Yi Xian glanced at them and asked, "Who?" The black-robed man behind her stepped forward and pointed at Yang Yi. "Him!" Yi Xian's gaze descended onto Yang Yi, and then she transformed into a ray of white light that shot forward. It was so fast and powerful that the space in the surroundings shook violently. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then Yang Yi was blasted over 300 m away. As soon as Yang Yi stopped himself, a huge mirror appeared above him, and then a ray of white light shot down and enveloped him. Moya and the others' expressions changed drastically. They were about to attack when an explosion resounded, and then the mirror flew back to Yi Xian's grasp. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Yang Yi leaped up from the hole in the ground and glanced at Yi Xian. "Do you know why blood is red?" She stretched out a finger and gestured at him. "Come here and tell me." Yang Yi waved his right hand at the sword on Shui-Iren's waist. "Come!" A sword howl resounded, and then Shui-Iren's sword left its sheath and transformed into a ray of light that entered Yang Ye's grasp. As soon as the sword entered his grasp, Yang Ye's aura instantly underwent a tremendous change. This was a peerless sword cultivator. At this moment, such an absurd thought had appeared in their minds. But Yi Xian had a solemn expression on her face. At her level of cultivation, she was able to sense if someone was strong. Suddenly, Yang Yi tapped his foot against the ground, and his finger swished as it transformed into a ray of light that flashed through the air. Fast! Yi Xian's pupils constricted at the sight of this attack. It felt very dangerous to her. Yi Xian didn't dare to act carefully in the slightest and waved her hand lightly. In an instant, a huge mirror appeared before her, and then a wave of powerful energy rippled out from the mirror. Meanwhile, Yang Ye's sword arrived. Hiss! A ray of light flashed. Bang! The mirror shook violently, and then cracks appeared all over it. Yi Xian was shocked, and she hurriedly put the mirror away. It was a divine treasure, and she didn't want to get it destroyed here. After that, she made a clawing motion, and a white whip appeared in her grasp. She raised her hand, and then the whip descended. Crack! As soon as it descended, a long mark appeared in space. However, Yang Ye's sword energy was faster. Bang! Yi Xian was blasted away, and then a sword pierced her body. The scene froze. Everyone was stunned. Yang Yi gazed at Yi Xian's pale face, and then he waved his right hand. The sword in her chest suddenly flew out of her and returned to his grasp. Meanwhile, blood sprayed from her chest. It was extremely shocking. Yang Yi gazed at her. "Do you know now?" Once he finished speaking, he flicked the sword back into the sheath on Shui-Iren's waist. Yang Yi gazed at Moya and the others. "Let's go." They nodded and were about to leave when Lu Yunxian suddenly gazed at Yi Xian. "Are you Yi Xian from the Yi clan?" The others gazed at him. Meanwhile, the hold in Yi Xian's chest actually started to gradually heal. Moreover, a ball of green light appeared there. It was healing. She glanced at Yang Yi, and then she gazed at Lu Yunxian. "Who are you?" Lu Yunxian pondered deeply for a moment and said, "The Lu clan." "The Lu clan." Yi Xian sized up Lu Yunxian and said, "Their successor?" Lu Yunxian shook his head. "No." "Oh." Yi Xian moved her gaze away. The Lu clan was a clan in the south region, and it could be considered as a subordinate clan of the Yi clan. It was one of the clans that ate at the Yi clan's table. Meanwhile, Lu Yunxian hesitated for a moment and said, "Actually, this may be a misunderstanding because Brother Yi is from the Yi clan too." Yi Xian frowned slightly and gazed at Yang Yi. "Him?" Lu Yunxian nodded. Yi Xian's frown deepened. "Impossible," Lu Yunxian said. "Brother Yi is just part of a branch family. not a main family member. Impossible. Yi Xian spoke solemnly. If he were part of a branch family, that branch family would have reported the existence of someone with such strength, and he would be allowed into the central part of the Yi clan. Lu Yunxian said, Brother Ye's identity is a little unique. He's an illegitimate child. An illegitimate child? Yi Xian's frown deepened again. The Yi clan had countless branches. As far as she knew, there were over 100 of them. They did still belong to the Yi clan, but they were pushed out of the central part of the Yi clan. As for an illegitimate child, not to mention in the branch families, such a person had quite an awkward position even in the main family, because such people were looked down upon and pushed aside. So, geniuses who grew up in such environments definitely held resentment toward the clan. Yi Xian pondered deeply for a long time before she gazed at Yang Yi. Which branch are you from? Which branch? Yang Yi was quite speechless. He too would like to know which branch he was from. Yang Yi shook his head. He didn't choose to answer her question and just walked away. Yi Xian frowned at the sight of this. After all, people from the branch family would be extremely humble before people from the main family. However, when she thought of Yang Ye's terrifying strength, she could understand why he acted in that way. He had the right to be proud. The black-robed man by her side said, Yi Xian. He's just an illegitimate child from a branch family. Yi Xian glanced coldly at him. With his strength and talent, do you think the clan would let him stay in the branch families? The black-robed man didn't dare to say another word. Yi Xian spoke solemnly. Our clan has many branches, and he clearly has no sense of belonging to the clan. Not only does he have no sense of belonging to our clan, he has no sense of belonging to his branch family either. After all, someone like him would have definitely grown up being cast aside. His viciousness and desire to kill is too strong. She fell silent at this point. The others behind her didn't dare to say a word either. A long time passed before she said, Send a message back to the clan. Ask them to find out if there's anyone named Yi Yang in our branch families. He's very strong and possesses excellent talent. His departure from the clan would be a loss for our clan. The black-robed man hesitated for a moment and nodded. Meanwhile, Lu Yunxian walked over to Yang Yi. Sorry, I exposed your identity without asking for your approval. Yang Yi replied, You did it for a reason, right? Based on his impression of Lu Yunxian, the latter wasn't a rash person or a busybody. Lu Yunxian spoke solemnly. That person you almost killed was Yi Xian. She's one of the Yi clan's patriarch's daughters. She's ranked the second in the Yi clan's younger generation, and those guys by her side were all from the main family. They are quite vengeful. So, if we just left like that, they would definitely use how you injured Yi Xian to take revenge on you. While they are no match for you, the Yi clan has a genius. Yi Xian's elder sister, Yi Zhibei. She's considered an extraordinary genius in Eternal Kingdom, and she was recruited by the War Dimension many years ago. Recruited. Yang Yi had heard that the War Dimension would recruit some extraordinary geniuses. Those geniuses were unlike them because they had been recruited and didn't have to pass any tests, but they had a test to pass. Yang Yi asked, You're worried that Yi Zhibei would come for me? Lu Yunxian nodded. Every clan is very united. Of course, they may not come seeking revenge from you. However, to avoid unnecessary trouble, revealing your identity is beneficial. Moreover, it may be of use to you once you're in War City, because Yi Zhibei is really very strong. She attained the 5-world realm 5 years ago. I've heard of her too. Meanwhile, Emoya spoke abruptly. When Yi Zhibei attained the 5-world realm, the Yi clan even sent out invitations to all the clans and powers throughout the South region. Besides that, the War Dimension stretched out an olive branch to her. Yang Yi smiled. They show off that much? Lu Yunxian explained. They do that for a reason. Besides Yi Zhibei, the Yi clan hasn't had an extraordinary genius in many years. A large clan, and especially one like theirs, will easily draw covetous gazes without someone capable in its younger generation. Just like the D clan from many, many years ago. They were driven out because their younger generation weren't capable enough. The competition between clans is brutal. He gazed at Yang Yi and continued, Brother Yi, Clans take geniuses very seriously. Based on your talent and strength, the Yi clan will definitely do everything it can to foster you. Yang Yi shook his head. I don't want to go to them. Emoya said, Brother Yi, do you know why those fellows by Yi Xian's side were able to attain the two-world realm? Not just them, we are the same too. Besides our own talent, the real reason all of us were able to attain the Limit-Breaker realm at our age is actually the resources given to us by our clans. Without those resources, your attainments may be inferior even if your natural talent is superb. It can be said that we members of these clans have our cultivations pushed up with money. Shui Iran nodded slightly and chimed in. They are right. Brother Yi, a single person's ability is limited. Based on your strength and talent, you'll definitely achieve great things with the Yi clan's help. Yang Yi was quite speechless. He was just a fake member of the Yi clan. At this moment, Yang Yi really regretted giving such a random excuse to the ancient sword sect's elder. Now, he had to use countless other lies to deal with that one lie. It was such a pain. Yang Yi fell silent for a moment and smiled. I know you have good intentions, but it's a little more complicated than that. We'll see what happens. They nodded and didn't say anything else. It all depended on Yang Ye's own decision. They sped up, and an ancient city finally appeared within their fields of vision a day later. The ancient city was huge and had its back to a mountain range. A boundless plain stood on both sides of the city. War City. Emoya and the others were visibly relieved when they saw the city. They shot forward at full speed and finally arrived before the city. Enter the city. So long as they entered the city, they would have truly joined the war dimension. They exchanged glances and strode swiftly toward the city. It didn't take long for them to arrive before its gates. But right when they were about to walk through it, a bald man and a man with a huge saber resting against his shoulder appeared before them. The bald man sized up Yang Ye's group. In the end, his gaze descended upon Emoya, and there was an evil smile on the corner of his mouth. You want to enter the city? Shui Iran nodded. We're from the ancient sword sect, and the bald man waved his hand. Don't tell me all of that. I don't care. You can enter the city if you want, but a world crystal each is the price. Or 150 divine crystals works too. Shui Iran frowned when he heard this. Meanwhile, Yang Yi flicked 4 world crystals over to the bald man. The others were stunned by this, and even the bald man and the man with the saber were stunned too. Yang Yi gazed at Emoya and the others. Let's not waste time and get inside. He didn't want any trouble, so he was buying his way in. Emoya and the others nodded, and they were about to enter the city with Yang Yi when the bald man suddenly said, I've changed my mind. 1 isn't enough. I want at least 5 each. As he spoke, he gazed at Yang Yi and grinned while stretching out his hand. Emoya and the others' faces turned gloomy when they heard the bald man. Clearly, the man was trying to take advantage of this situation. At this moment, all of them revealed undisguised rage. But the bald man and his companion ignored their rage and just gazed at Yang Yi with undisguised greed and ridicule. A fat sheep. They'd paid a lot of money to get into the city, and they finally found someone rich, so how could they not take a good chunk of meat from this fat sheep? Yang Yi shook his head and sighed. This was a common occurrence. Taking a step back wouldn't give you peace. It would just make the other party take 1 step forward and try to take a yard. When you wanted to avoid trouble, the other would think you were afraid and easy to bully instead. That was how many people acted. They had this problem that if they were given a little face, their smiles would widen and brighten up. Yang Yi shook his head, gazed at the bald man, and then waved his right hand. Over a dozen world crystals appeared before him. Yang Yi cracked a smile. Come take it then. The bald man's eyes narrowed slightly. All right. He was about to stretch out his hand, but right when it had been stretched out to Yang Yi, a ray of sword energy flashed. Hiss! The bald man's right arm fell off his shoulder. Blood sprayed like a fountain. However, this wasn't the end of it. A sword pressed against the bald man's forehead. It pierced half an inch deep, causing a strand of blood to spray from the bald man and instantly cover his face. Everyone here was stunned. Suddenly, Yang Yi waved his right hand, and a ray of light took the bald man's left hand too. Yang Yi severed it with such ease. At this moment, the bald man was armless. Yang Yi cracked a smile. Go on. Why aren't you taking it? The bald man stared at Yang Yi. I didn't expect to encounter someone like you. Kill me if you want. Yang Yi waved his right hand, and the spatial ring on the severed arm flew over into his grasp. There were 2 world crystals and more than 200 divine crystals within it. Obviously, the bald man had done quite a bit of robbing. Suddenly, the man with the saber attacked, and his saber slashed down at Yang Yi. He was clearly trying to save the bald man. However, a sword suddenly blasted the man flying and nailed him to the city walls. The man gazed at his saber with shock. His saber was in countless pieces now. An absolutely powerful attack. Moya and the others were extremely shocked too. They knew Yang Yi was very strong when he used the sword, but they hadn't expected him to be this strong. All of them were 3 world realm experts. Moreover, they had clearly experienced countless battles and were definitely formidable in battle. However, they hadn't been able to resist a single attack. This is a misunderstanding. Suddenly, a voice came from the side, and then a man walked over with a folding hand in his grasp. The man walked over to Xianxia's group and smiled. These are my friends. As far as I'm concerned, it was all just a misunderstanding. So let's just let it go. All right? A misunderstanding? Yang Yi gazed at the man and smiled. I think it may be a misunderstanding too, right? Your friends took 20 world crystals from me. Tell them to return those crystals, all right? 20 world crystals. Moya and the others had quite weird expressions on their faces. They were shocked that Yang Yi was actually trying to rob them at a time like this. The man with the folding fan's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard Yang Yi, but the smile on his face remained. However, it was quite ghastly and cold now. Nonsense. Meanwhile, the bald man suddenly cursed. You're fucking saying that I took? Hiss! Suddenly, his head flew up into the air. Blood sprayed like a fountain. He was dead. Everyone here was stunned. They hadn't expected Yang Yi to kill the bald man. The smile on the man's face turned utterly ghastly and cold now. While the bald man had lost his head, his soul had escaped his body at the critical moment. But Yang Yi still refused to spare him. Yang Yi was about to attack when the man with the folding fan suddenly unfurled the fan, and then a wave of powerful energy surged out from the fan. The 4-world realm. Yang Yi swung his sword. Hiss! The energy was instantly sliced into bits, and the man himself was blasted to the city walls. Yang Yi flicked a ray of sword energy over and nailed the bald man's soul to the wall. At this moment, the bald man was truly afraid, because if he lost his soul, then he would really vanish from this world. He was about to say something, but Yang Yi didn't give him the chance and obliterated his soul with a ray of sword energy. He was truly gone. The man with the folding fan had an extremely unsightly expression on his face. Aren't you going a little too far? Too far. Yang Yi gazed at the man. I'm in a very bad mood right now. 3 breaths of time, that's all you have. If you're still here after that, I'll kill you too. Forget it, I'll just kill you. A ray of light flashed once he finished speaking. The man's expression changed drastically. He took a step back and tossed the fan forward. In an instant, the fan started expanding as it flew. However, it hadn't even revealed its might when a ray of sword energy slashed it into bits. The sword shot forward and instantly pierced the man's forehead. The man's figure stiffened on the spot, and disbelief filled his eyes. Weren't we still negotiating? Why did he suddenly attack? How could he be so strong? That was the last thought in his mind, and he died with endless questions. The biggest question he had was that Yang Yi had been planning to rob them, and he couldn't figure out why Yang Yi had suddenly attacked to kill instead. He couldn't figure it out even until he took his last breath. After he killed the man with the folding fan, Yang Yi launched another attack that instantly took the head of the man with the saber. All 3 of them were dead. Moya and the others gazed at Yang Yi with slight fear. At this moment, he was emanating an extremely oppressive and sharp desire to kill. He was quite terrifying at this moment. A few breaths of time later, Yang Yi gradually calmed down, and then he waved his hand and took the spatial rings of the other two. He glanced through them and noticed 5 and 3 world crystals respectively. There were many other things in their spatial rings, but not one was up to his standards. He had either divine treasures or super divine treasures, so most treasures were truly beyond his notice. Yang Yi put the rings away and gazed at the others. "Let's head inside," Lu Yunxian spoke solemnly. "Trouble may come because of this." Yang Yi grinned. "It's fine. I'll deal with it." He glanced up at this point. There was a woman at a corner of the city walls. She was seated on it with her legs dangling down while eating cucumber. She glanced at him and didn't say anything. Yang Yi didn't say anything either. He moved his gaze away and entered the city with the others. The woman took another bite of her cucumber and looked off into the distance. It didn't take long for a few people to appear there. It was Yi Xian's group. The woman leaped off the wall. Yi Xian immediately ran over when she saw the woman. "Sister!" The woman was the eldest young miss of the Yi clan and its next patriarch, Yi Zhibei. Yi Zhibei sized up Yi Xian, and then she gazed at the others behind Yi Xian. They hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Eldest young miss." Yi Zhibei took another bite of cucumber and spoke indifferently. "What are you doing here?" Cold sweat instantly emerged on their faces. Only those who'd come in contact with her knew how terrifying she was. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Father asked them to come with me and temper themselves." Yi Zhibei said indifferently, "Go back." Yi Xian was quite embarrassed by this, and the others had unsightly expressions on their faces. Meanwhile, Yi Zhibei took another bite. "Must I repeat myself?" The black-robed men shot pleading gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Sister, we can only head inside now. If they leave, the others at home will definitely ridicule them. Don't worry, they won't cause trouble for you. They will do everything you say." Yi Zhibei glanced at her. "They will die here." Meanwhile, a black-robed man hurriedly said, "Eldest young miss, we're not afraid of death. It's true, so please give us a chance. If we do die, we will have no regrets." Yi Zhibei fell silent and seemed to be thinking. Meanwhile, Yi Xian hurriedly changed the topic. "Big sis, I met a sword cultivator earlier. He was very strong." Yi Zhibei asked, "A sword cultivator in a green robe?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. "That's him." "Right, how do you know?" She replied indifferently, "He just went inside." Yi Xian raised a finger. "He almost killed me with a single attack earlier. If I didn't have that divine treasure Father gave me, I wouldn't be able to see you again." "Kill you?" Yi Zhibei frowned, and the remaining cucumber in her hand was obliterated. Yi Xian nodded and said, "Don't be angry, because he isn't an outsider, he's from our clan." Yi Zhibei's frown deepened. "Our clan?" Yi Xian nodded. "He's an illegitimate child from a branch family, and he's in the ancient sword sect right now." "An illegitimate child?" Yi Zhibei asked. "Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded. "I am." Actually, she wasn't very sure. However, she had no choice in order to divert her sister's attention away from the black-robed men. Yi Zhibei fell silent for a long time and said, "Let's go inside first." They turned around and walked into the city. When they arrived before the city gates, a middle-aged man appeared before them. He glanced at the corpses in the distance and gazed at Yi Zhibei. His expression changed slightly when he saw her, and then he said, "Young Miss Yi." Yi Zhibei nodded slightly and was about to head inside when the middle-aged man asked, "Young Miss Yi, do you know who did that?" Yi Zhibei replied indifferently, "You're asking me?" The middle-aged man nodded. "Yes." She glanced at him. "You're too ugly, so I don't want to tell you." She led the others into the city once she finished speaking. The middle-aged man's face was quite unsightly. "Is it wrong to be ugly?" The middle-aged man would naturally not believe the reason she gave. Of course, he didn't dare to go confront her either. Yi Zhibei was one of the few people in this city who should not be offended. The middle-aged man glanced at the surroundings and said, "Investigate the matter." "Yes." A black shadow soundlessly vanished from the corner. The middle-aged man glanced at the corpses and had quite a solemn expression on his face. A single attack. Such sharp attacks of the sword. Once they entered the city, it didn't take long for Li Mu to appear before them again. Li Mu glanced at them. Congratulations! Now you've truly joined the war dimension. I've sent word to your sects and clans about it. Next, you must choose an organization to join and survive. Xianxia asked, What do you mean? Li Mu didn't say anything and was about to leave, but Yang Yi flicked a world crystal over to him. Li Mu glanced at Yang Yi and took the world crystal. You should be aware that the people here are the geniuses from all the top powers throughout Eternal Kingdom. Once they arrived here, they formed their own groups. Simply speaking, this place is no different than the outside world. If you want to survive, it's best to choose a reliable organization to join. Xianxia asked, Are there people from my ancient sword sect here? Li Mu nodded. According to my knowledge, there are but very few. Moreover, they haven't formed an organization of their own. You sword cultivators like to be on your own. Of course, the precondition is formidable strength. Otherwise, freedom? That's only a dream. Li Mu was about to leave once he finished speaking, but he seemed to have thought of something and gazed at Yang Yi. I'll give you an extra warning. It's best to keep a low profile while you're new here. There is no lack of ruthless people here, and there is no lack of people with strength or formidable backgrounds. He turned around and left once he finished speaking. Once Li Mu was gone, Yang Yi gazed at the others. Do all of you have a place to go? They shook their heads. They were completely unfamiliar with the place. Suddenly, a man walked over to them and smiled. Are you new to the city? They gazed at him, and he smiled. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Xianxia, and I'm in charge of Cloud Observation Tower's external affairs. Cloud Observation Tower? Xianxia asked. Can you tell us more? Xianxia smiled. You're new here, so it's normal to not know much about this place. Allow me to introduce War City to you. I'm sure you're aware that Eternal Kingdom is divided into 5 regions or 5 powers. They are the Yi clan of the south, the Lang clan of the north, the Ancient Sword Sect of the west, the Gu clan of the east, and the Xing clan of the central region. Obviously, the Xing clan is the strongest. After all, their patriarch is our eternal lord. He paused for a moment and continued. Besides the Ancient Sword Sect, all of the other top powers have established their own organization here. There is fighting and conflict here too. Besides these 4 organizations, there are other small organizations too, like my Cloud Observation Tower. We aren't part of any of the 4 top organizations. We are just a group of independent cultivators. Independent cultivators. Xianxia and the others were quite tempted. Xianxia continued. If I'm being honest, I came to you because no one greeted you on your arrival. If you were from those powers and their organizations, they would have sent someone to welcome you on arrival. Since no one did that, I think you're either from the Ancient Sword Sect or independent cultivators. Since you carry swords, I'm sure it's the former. Xianxia nodded. We are disciples of the Ancient Sword Sect. Xianxia smiled. Then would you be willing to join my Cloud Observation Tower? Xianxia and the others exchanged glances, and then they gazed at Yang Yi. Yang Yi smiled. I like to be on my own. Xianxia glanced at Yang Yi and said, Allow me to be honest. It isn't easy to survive here on your own. Yang Yi smiled. It's fine. I prefer to be on my own. I have more freedom. Xianxia nodded and didn't say anything else. In the end, the others decided to join Cloud Observation Tower. When they parted, Xianxia cupped his fist to Yang Yi. Brother Yi, until next time. Yang Yi nodded. Take care. Xianxia suddenly asked, Are you really not coming with us? Yang Yi shook his head. Just as he'd said, he liked being on his own because he had more freedom. Xianxia hesitated for a moment and nodded. Then take care. They left with Xianxia and only Yang Yi remained here. Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings. So this is the war dimension? The war dimension. He was very curious about this place because the main force against the desolate race was here, but he hadn't been able to discern anything special about this place yet. Yang Yi remained silent for a moment and then he walked off toward the streets. It didn't take long for him to find a luxurious hotel that was very huge. House of Indulgence. Yang Yi walked in and then a beautiful woman walked over. She bowed slightly to Yang Yi and asked, "May I know what you need?" Yang Yi glanced at her and was quite surprised because she was actually a three-world realm expert. A three-world realm expert. Yang Yi sized up the woman and said, "A room, a quiet one." She smiled. 10 divine crystals per day. I'll give you 10% off if you book the room for a month. 10 divine crystals. So 300 divine crystals a month. That was equivalent to 3 world crystals. It was such a huge profit. Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied, "I'll take 5 days." He flicked 50 divine crystals to her. She took them and smiled. "We have standard rooms, superior rooms, and deluxe rooms. Standard rooms are 10 divine crystals per day. Superior rooms are 15, and deluxe rooms are 30. Would you like to switch rooms?" Yang Yi pointed at himself. "Do I look like I'm rich?" Her smile stiffened, but it didn't take long for her smile to return to normal. "Of course. Allow me to take you to your room." She led Yang Yi to a room on the 3rd floor. Meanwhile, she suddenly asked, "Do you need a companion for mutual cultivation?" "Huh." Yang Yi was stunned. She added, "Mutual cultivation companions. 1 world crystal per night for an average companion. 5 world crystals per night for a high-class companion who knows mutual cultivation techniques. There are standard companions too. They are 2 world crystals per night. Do you need one?" Yang Yi thought for a moment and asked, "People provide that kind of service?" She glanced at him. "You think it's very embarrassing?" Yang Yi was stunned and asked, "Is it honorable?" She replied indifferently, "Are they stealing?" Yang Yi shook his head. She continued, "Are they deceiving?" Yang Yi shook his head again. She asked again, "Are they robbing?" Yang Yi shook his head once more. She said, "Since they are not doing any of that, why do you think they are an embarrassment?" Yang Yi was speechless. She continued. "As for selling themselves, it's their own business. I think that others should not take the moral high ground and judge them." Yang Yi shook his head. "You misunderstood me. I'm not looking down on them. I meant that they should be around the 4-world realm. Experts like that should have no lack of world crystals, right? Why wouldn't they?" She replied with a question. "I'm at the peak of the 3-world realm right now. If I want to advance to the 4-world realm, I'll need a lot of resources. If I had 40 or 50 world crystals, I can advance at any time, but I don't rob for it. Will there be a risk? The slightest mistake may cost me my life. Kill demon beasts? Are those demon beasts that easy to kill?" She glanced at him and continued, "You don't seem to be of ordinary background, or I should say that you should be the young master of some power. So, some things are easily within your reach, but to people without any background like us, every single step on the path of the martial Tao takes 120% of our strength. If you need it, then let me know, and I'll make the arrangements." She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Yang Yi fell silent. World crystals. At this moment, he recalled his past when he was living with his mother and sister. At that time, wasn't he willing to do anything for a little money? But after he met Snowy, he'd never lacked resources again. It could be said that once he met Snowy, he had divine treasures and world crystals whenever he wanted them. But it wasn't the same for others. Perhaps just 1 world crystal took a very, very long time to obtain. A long time passed before Yang Yi sighed with emotion. "I should cherish it all. There were things which should not be squandered upon being obtained, and they should be cherished. And then there was Snowy too." Needless to say, Yang Yi really missed the little fellow, and he missed the violent and aggressive area too. He wondered if they were causing trouble over there. And Nanjing too. He wondered how she was doing. Yang Yi shook his head and was about to close the door so that he could cultivate in the primordial pagoda. However, the woman from before appeared at the door. Yang Yi smiled. "I don't need special services." She glanced at him and said, "Someone is looking for you. Allow me to be honest, they aren't here to talk." They weren't here to talk. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he thought of something. Those people he killed outside the city. He knew that they were here for him now. She said, "If you're willing to take a deluxe room, Then our hotel will protect you. Yang Yi smiled. For how long? She replied indifferently. As soon as you're staying. Yang Yi shook his head. Forget it. That's a little expensive. I'll just go kill them. Yang Yi walked out of the room as he spoke. The woman was stunned, speechless.